Okay, let me ask you. Have you ever wanted to read Blood Meridian, but were too squeamish to handle descriptions of paper cuts and stubbed toes? Have you ever wanted to read Lord of the Rings, but you were too intimidated by the scope and the 300 pages discussing the trees the Fellowship befriended along the way? Luckily for you, and probably just me, David Harrod answered the fear of sunk cost fallacy and whipped up Improvidence, an overnight novel. A novel by every stretch of the term, clocking in at a measly 86, technically 85, pages. This novel light is a supercut of a grand adventure epic, except its short length helps it stand tall as a surpassingly good read. And although I said it's a snippet of a grand adventure epic, it's not that at all. It is the short tale of a boring man's boring assignment to count trees and inspect an abandoned fort that the occupants themselves became too bored with, all over in the fictional land of West Virginia. And every page of it is good and delicious, and I loved it. I scooped up this book when I saw its modest page count, yet somehow I was surprised to discover it was pocket-sized when it arrived. I found this added to the charm of the book, just like how its bone-white pages are a complement to the bloody skull on the cover. The splattering bits of blood on the cover and the back are nice. They're a nice touch as well. Whatever the font is on the title, I like that as well. It's very gritty for a book that itself actually isn't that gritty. So, don't let the edgy blood skull mislead you. This book knows how to keep its pants on, just like the main character occasionally can. Our main character doesn't have a name. That's too interesting for him. If he has one, I have forgotten it. Just like the women he rescues in the book don't care to ask him. They just want to get under his roof, and by extension, into his pants. What we really care about isn't names. It's how many provisions do we need to stock in Harper's Ferry in order to once again bring civilization east of the Tigard. That's the plot of the book. Man gets BA in engineering. The literal state of Ohio says, go on scouting mission. Maybe you come back. He isn't sent alone, though. He's joined by the proper scout and goodest of boys, Jeremy Brown, the absolute bro you want at your side, locked and loaded. Now, those on the spectrum will have perhaps noticed I mentioned bringing civilization back and east of the Tigard River. This leads me to mentioning the unique world of Improvidence. It's boring and undeveloped. I'm exaggerating, except not really. The author took a very hands-off approach to explaining the state of the world. In fact, the largest indicator what you're reading is technically post-apocalypse is found on the back of the book. Generations after the dissolution of modern civilization. That's all you get. The book itself will make a few mentions of the past, referring to the immoral era, and there are brief descriptions of old asphalt roads which are able to get some use out of still. It's very easy to imagine this book is set in the 19th century, and there are few reminders it isn't. There are no deep lore dumps in this book either. That's not what we care about. What we care about is how many pounds of potted beef and salted pork do we need to kickstart Re-Manifest Destiny. There are a few sprinkles of information about the world here and there, though. There's mention of Latino being a language spoken in some communities out east. There's also mention of Jersey slave camps, a practice that evidently survives the apocalypse. Other than that, there is a sort of return to the state identity, as was the case in antebellum America. People from other states are seen as being from other races, with our main characters noticeably profiling Virginians for having a bronze type of skin. This is the style and the strength of Improvidence. Subtlety. Subtlety is strongest, too, here in its regards to depictions of violence. As I said, the cover is somewhat misleading. Though there are skulls to be found in the wilds of West Virginia, violence is not something the author celebrates. Death is something that always feels somewhat near in the book, perhaps just one more mountain away. but it's surprisingly limited in appearance. When bloodshed does occur, the author never outright describes it as stabbing or being shot. A very tactful use of description is instead employed, such as the sound of thunder erupting, followed by the sensation of wetness being found on a character's face. You know what happened. The characters know what happened. It's what I call just good writing. And I feel that's what can be found in Improvidence. Just good writing. Especially in description. The book is a mirage of landscape oil paintings, images of West Virginia's mountains, and it's pieced together by an excellent, well-written flow. I became conscious of how much I liked the style of writing in Chapter 6, so I'll read over the opening and last lines of that chapter to provide a feel. Each day, one horizon of mountains drifted into another, but the gravesite was never far from mind, as if no matter how far we rode over graveled road or wind-blasted cliff, a part of me still stood over that small black body. I slammed the book onto the table and left. Climbing the earthwork, I found Jeremy sitting cross-legged, rifle over his knees, and partially obscured by the tall grass. A blessedly clean breeze ran over us, sweet with the promise of rain. The flow of writing is good in the book. It can be read in a single sitting. You only need to read the first 40 pages, and by then you reach the pursuit, the main action segments of the book. I should mention, this isn't a book about hardcore survival in the wild. The danger is made more manifest when our characters become hunted, but beyond that, the wilderness doesn't pose a striking challenge, which I personally expected more of a presence. The biggest hurdle Mother Nature offers is mountains, which are just a bitch to get around. So it doesn't feel like too much in the way of man versus nature. It pretty much boils down to man versus civilization, and what form it ought to take. The tribals are damn well justified in their hunt of the main characters. They know what will happen if they return to Ohio with their notes, inevitable or not the return of civilization. Which is why I feel like morality was the most interesting theme in Improvidence. There really isn't anyone who's morally wrong in the book, and yet provocation for violence remains fully available and on the table. Now actually, I lied. I lied completely. There is immense amounts of immorality found in the subplot, in which our main characters take refuge in a homestead. The women there want our main character to sort of rescue them from their reclusive life under the homesteader they live with. Our main character behaves a teensy bit immorally with the women here, and the women perform a few oopsie-daisies themselves with the implications of a little something called infanticide. I should reiterate, the Old World is known to these people as the immoral era, and the very religion which seems to have evolved out of Christianity, for people in Ohio at least, it appears to be something called moralism. Don't get excited though. Moralism is something that's only really mentioned at the beginning and the very end of the book. Everything else in between, I suggest you go read for yourself. I enjoyed reading Improvidence, and I feel like I could recommend this book to anybody. It's short and easy to read, and it doesn't revel in its descriptions of violence. This is something anyone could enjoy. That's because the big secret is that this book is actually just a Western. Its closest counterpart in other media I can think of is the movie Hostiles, starring Christian Bale. Both are stories of people traversing an open land where death is quick and, honestly, not very climactic. The endings even sort of parallel each other, although the tones are completely different. Now, the only page I didn't like from Improvidence is page 54, which was left blank. I hope future editions will retain this page. I see it as a metaphor for the future and the unknown, something our characters are terrified to meet. Oh, and speaking of format, I guess I should mention I also like that every chapter features these pictures of tree branches. As the story, as well as autumn, progresses, the leaves begin to fall off until the branches are bare. I like that attention to detail. Anyways, that's all I've got to say. This book is short and it's sweet, and it makes for an overnight treat. Cheers.